¿Se acuerdan que la semana pasada no vine 4 de los 5 días de la semana? Bueno, la razón de esa ausencia no es que me haya ido yo de la vacación, ojalá hubiese sido así. La realidad real es que me fui enviado a una misión especial a los United, a Los Ángeles, específicamente Los Ángeles, California, para traerles grandes historias de mexicanos que la andan partiendo allá, rompiendo el queso angelino, en colaboración con la versión gabacha que tenemos aquí del Heraldo, que es Heraldo USA. Por eso, hoy vamos a empezar una serie de pláticas, de entrevistas que tuve con las personas que pues, consideramos más, los perfiles que consideramos más destacadas allá de Los Ángeles, la comunidad latina, mexicana, sobre todo en Los Ángeles. Y en este caso vamos a abrir boca con Leticia Rhi Buckley. Ella es la CEO, la directora general de la Plaza, Cultura y Artes, un museo y centro cultural que se encarga, bueno, que en un momento fue exclusivamente para mexas, no sé, los que hacen, cuando hace el grito el 16 de septiembre, ahí arman una de Santo, que es, y del 5 de mayo, y cuanta madre. Entonces, ellos son como, digamos, los primeros y hasta el momento más grande movimiento cultural y artístico. Primero mexa solamente y ya luego lo abrieron a toda Latinoamérica, allá en la bella y hermosa ciudad de Los Ángeles. Vamos a hablar ahorita con Leticia Buckley. Ella es la directora general de la Plaza Arte y Cultura. Me van a ver cambiar a inglés, van a aparecer letritos para que entiendan todo bien. Pero pues bueno, van a ver que van a disfrutar esta entrevista. Leticia, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
You're very welcome. So, tell us a little bit of the story here in La Plaza de la Cultura. What's the purpose of having this right across the street from such a symbolic part of Mexican culture?
Historic part. So La Plaza de Cultura y Artes was really founded to be a place to tell the history of Mexican and Mexican Americans in Los Angeles. Okay. Very specifically about Los Angeles, very much about Mexican and Mexican Americans. We celebrate all Latinx culture and all Latino people. Yeah. And this really is a community hub. We're both a museum, but also a cultural center and a space for celebrating and experiencing all of the really amazing components of being Latino in Los Angeles.
Right. Yeah, but you have a lot of history back,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
Not just going back to when Los Angeles was part of Mexico,
yeah, it was
but
very much
way
so.
back.
Yeah, from hundreds and hundreds of years, and we were so this. As we all know, California was actually Mexico before it was the United States, and the city was founded by the pobladores, essentially, yes. People who came here from Mexico from throughout and to create a home before the city was founded. But we're in a really historic part of town, and we're at the birthplace of Los Angeles. And I always say you cannot tell the story of Los Angeles without telling the story of Latinos, because we are connected and very much a critical part of the founding of Los Angeles as we know it today.
Sure. So when was this the Plaza founded?
So La Plaza was founded in 2011.
Okay.
So we're
quite recent.
Yeah, we're young. It's only
I thought it was way back.
No, 13, 14 years old. We're in a building that's over 100 years old, but the museum itself.
That always helps.
I know, right? Yes. But we've been around for 13 years as an organization, and we're really in this really exciting moment in time. Very much the first 13 years were about building relationships with the community, and now we're really looking at what comes next over the next 13 years and 15 and 20 years.
Sure. And what have you seen in these 13 years since you were founded with the Mexican community here? What have you seen here?
Well, I will say, so much of, the reality is at the center of so much that makes up what makes Los Angeles so unique and special, I believe, is Mexicans and Mexican Americans and Latinos, right? In terms of our food, our music, our dance, our community, and that intersection of being Latino in Los Angeles, everything, across the board. And what we've seen really over the years, and particularly I would say here in downtown LA and at a space like La Plaza, is an opportunity to be able to tell the stories of Latinos that are in Los Angeles, be able to share that history that frankly isn't taught in school.
Not even here?
No, it's not taught in school. So for example, walking through our museum, you walk through and you learn about repatriation, where Mexicans were brought here, and literally right next door at La Placita, the oldest church in Los Angeles, right as they walked out of church, Mexicans were then wrangled and sent back to Mexico, but they're United States citizens. People don't know that, and that was less than 100 years ago in terms of the history.
Of course.
But there are young people, my kids, who are living a bicultural, biracial life, don't have that history being taught to them in school. So when people walk through our space, they are finding connections to their history, their family, in ways that they didn't even realize existed.
Right. So having all this historical background on these wrangling and raids that happen right in the middle of the day, right? With people that by all ways and means and even lawfully were US citizens, like born and raised here and then sent back, as you said, to Mexican territory. Have you seen that still like goes around in the community? I mean, even though it doesn't happen in the physical world?
But I would say actually it does happen. It just happens differently. The history we're telling isn't history that is all that different from what we see today. I mean, we look at things like redlining that was going on in Los Angeles, where certain parts of the community and certain parts of town, I could never have owned a building or a house because I'm Mexican.
Or even being CEO for an organization,
as a woman, right? I mean, there's many things. But the reality is we're still facing some of the same challenges and issues that our ancestors, our folks that were here from way before, we're just looking at it differently. I mean, we think about what's going on in the border today, right? And like literally at the border from one side to the other, and who's being allowed in and who's not. There are people making those decisions for us. So I think it's important that we tell that history and that we recognize that that history actually isn't in the past, that it actually continues to happen, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we continue to lift up those voices and continue to amplify that it isn't over, unfortunately. It's just part of the reality of the world that we live in.
So with the exhibition that you have downstairs here in La Plaza, have you seen the message that you want to convey, like permeating all across the community?
Yeah, for sure. And I will say, just even walking through and hearing people make connections to it around, like, oh, I didn't know that was going on, or I went to Roosevelt High School where we had the walkouts in the late 1960s, right? Or I personally just recently found out that my grandfather was a bracero. I had no idea he was part of the bracero program. I had no idea, just found out, and my mom said to me, oh yeah,
like nothing, right?
Like nothing, right? But again, those are the kinds of things, because the reality is we don't realize, I think, that we are part of history, and that when we talk about history, that it isn't actually that we're contributing to that, but the reality is we are all part of that history. And so, yeah, I see it in my children, I see it in the community and the people that I work with and the people that I serve, both at cultural institutions, but also just politically and across the board of what's going on in Los Angeles.
Right. Do you think, I've seen like quite a phenomenon of Latino people here, that some of them kind of feel embarrassed and like want to leave behind their heritage or the cultural baggage behind.
Yeah.
Do you think like establishments like La Plaza kind of try to, I don't know, like make them, instead of being shamed, like
something
pride?
to be proud of. Yeah. I think that's definitely true. I will say, I think my generation of Latinos, definitely, I'm first generation. I am,
like born here.
Born here, first generation. A lot of my friends and colleagues, didn't speak the language, and I learned how to speak the language. I speak the language, but my comfort level.
You were telling me your first language
was Spanish, right? But and that was just and in terms of that. The idea that we had to assimilate, right? That there was a generation that I think that is the case, and that we continue to, that we see, and that people are shedding that. But I would say I'm actually really excited and proud to see generations younger, my kids' generation, who actually are really embracing their identity, because there's a recognition that you're still Latino if you don't speak Spanish. You're still Mexican if you've not been to Mexico.
Of course.
You're still, right? This idea that our identity is such a critical part of who we are, and that we are so much about the history of where we live. And that's like a place that what makes La Plaza so important and so special, because we are telling the stories, and people walk through our galleries and they see their connection. They see people that look like them. They see stories that they have heard maybe told by an abuelita or a tia, right? That they're making that connection. So a place like La Plaza is, I believe, really special and really important to ensure that that history isn't lost.
Leticia, thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
taking your time.
Thank you so much.
Regresamos al estudio.